on some hands, we just decided this was evil and had to be eliminated at every turn. And batch processing is where people have to do some kind of form or something, and they wait until they've done 25 or 50 or 100 before they move it on to the next step in the process. And unfortunately, that means the person behind them sometimes is waiting with nothing to do. You don't have a pull stream that is synchronized. You have a push stream and a lot of inefficiency going on. So batch processing, we see over and over and over again. Eliminate that. It helps a lot. Another government issue is multiple levels of authority or multiple levels of signatures required. And we understand that you have to, have some accountability, but we find over and over again that things go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. 3 signatures, 4 signatures, 5 signatures. How many signatures are enough for accountability? We're starting to get rid of these kinds of steps, and we're moving forward a lot quicker. The other thing that happens over and over again is with the forms for applications and how often they're not completed properly. And what happens is a form gets turned in, and then it has to get sent back because it is not complete. And so mail goes back and forth and back and forth. Slowly but slowly, this thing finally gets completed, and it just takes all kinds of time. So we're looking at a couple different things there. One of them is to use, the Pokioka principle of making it mistake-proof from the beginning. And the other, remarkably enough, is as simple as just when our processes, if you've got something wrong, just call them. Don't rely on the slowest system possible back and forth to get information. Just call. It speeds up processes considerably. The other thing that happens is that frequently applications come in to many places, to many people, and worse yet, sometimes you get a different answer depending on where the applications come in, and we almost encourage people to answer shop. And we really have to do a lot of work to make sure that there's a single source of entry for various kinds of requests just to speed up our process. Now, this next one kind of reminds me of the grocery lane, the 12 items or later, but over and over again we find out that some of our requests are complicated and some of them are simple. But unfortunately, there's just one line. And so something very, very complicated ends up taking a long time, but it also holds up everything afterwards. So we find ourselves kind of looking at routing standardization in various ways of making lanes that are faster for the easy things, and then we focus in on the harder things so that they don't hold everything else up. There is a sort of a stereotype of state employees maybe being lazy or leaning on their shovels, but I've got something kind of counterintuitive to that we find over and over again, and that is you look at these processes that you create on the wall, and they're 80 steps, 100 steps, 150 steps, back and forth, and you just sometimes marvel that anything gets done. But when you look at why it gets done, it's frequently because of the heroics of state employees, their own actions to work all hours and do crazy things to make sure everyone is paid or to make sure services come out is commendable, but sometimes those heroics keep us from actually fixing those things that need to be fixed. And finally, this is something that happens constantly. People come up to us and say, we thought the feds were going to keep us from being able to move forward, or we thought the legislature said we have to do it this way, or the governor requires us this, or the auditor or statute. Over and over and over again, that's the excuse for continuing to do the things the same way. And so during our events, we say, well, now, wait a minute, let's take an actual look at them, and let's study them. And what we find more often than not is indeed these statutes tell us what to do, but they do not tell us how to do it. And so we have much more flexible than we think in terms of changing our processes and making things simpler, faster, better, and less costly. Some of the lessons that we've learned as we move forward that are really critical to our success is that your senior managers and sponsors can't just support this. They have to swear to implement it. No one wants to be on a guess again committee, and that's the kind of committee where you come up with all kinds of ideas and you present it, and the person responsible says, well, that's not what I had in mind. Go back and guess again. They have to be committed. They have to be in touch. They're a part of this. And we start implementing things on Thursday. Here's something we've learned the hard way. I kind of make fun of it with no shirts, no data. But if you do not have the data you need, then you just don't know if you're successful. And we will stop events or we will postpone them until we're able to get some actual data, because you cannot make improvements based on what people think or how things seem or anecdotal information. Many times on Wednesday, I told you about the Wednesday trough, we will actually have members call up senior managers and say, you got to pull a plug on this. This is horrible. It's paralysis of analysis. We're not getting anything done. You have to let it go, because once you work through that, on Thursday, you really get some amazing kinds of results. And finally, this is sort of a don't try this at home. You really do need to have a trained, experienced lead expert to facilitate this. If you're facilitating a regular group for an hour, you can kind of get by. But when you have emotional, passionate, frustrated people together for a week, it takes a pretty skilled facilitator to move you forward. And then finally, you think you're done after a week, but in truth, the hard part has just begun. You have to follow up. You have to implement. And as a part of coordinating these things, you have to come up with a method to routinely follow up. We do 30, 60, 90-day follow-ups, but we find out more and more that it really helps to meet with the people on Monday, to give them a call frequently, to ask for information all the time. If the momentum stops, you really sometimes have a hard time moving forward. And then just tell me briefly what we're looking at for some of our next steps. As I said in the beginning, we didn't really do a lot of planning. We kind of relied on pain to choose where we were going to use our Kaizen events. And we really want to more and more have these become part of our strategic planning efforts, and specifically do value stream maps. We've been doing several of those, and they really help to focus the organization on what they want to look like, and then how they're going to look that way, and then what are the Kaizen events that you should have to move things forward. We need to train more internal facilitators. Tell you, the more events we have, if you start collecting $33 million more dollars, you see that the more things you do, the better off you are. So we want to train a lot more facilitators internally to be able to work on these efforts. And we want to develop a better infrastructure to follow up as well, so that we know what's going on. We've got a website in development. There's a lot of things going on. But if you let things drift, you just don't get the kind of results you should. And then finally, of course, this isn't just about having some events now and then. It really is about translating your lean principles and tools into the day-to-day management of the organization, not just during Kaizen events. But you got to start out with some successes. Those successes lead to more successes, and then you can begin to change the culture. And with that, let me open it up to questions that anyone may have.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. As a reminder, to participate in the Q&A session, simply type your question into the Ask a Question text area in the bottom corner of your screen and click the Submit button. So the first question that has come in, Steve, you have some good examples of successes. Did you have any lessons learned where things didn't work out the way you wanted them to?
Yeah, we did. Now, I want to say that we kind of jokingly, when we were at about the 20 mark, said that we were 19-0-1 because we had one that didn't go very well, but we still got something from it. But it really involves not having the data. And once we got into the program, there was a lot of arguments about what was true, what wasn't true. We didn't have any data to back it up, so we relied on opinions. And what was really embarrassing is when we got towards the end and had collected the data, it showed us that we were really going in the wrong direction. So we made some improvements, but we actually ended up creating a go, no-go checklist as a result of that particular experience, so that there's a checklist, and if we don't have this, that, and the next thing, we do not move forward, and data is one of the most critical ones. We postpone it until we have that. Can't emphasize enough that if you don't know how you're doing, you don't know if you've made a successful change.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
The next question. I have heard about sometimes people losing their jobs after a Kaizen event due to job cuts. How do you get the team involved when they might be worried about losing their jobs?
Yeah, and it's a very scary time when you're in government as well. You hear in the news about the layoffs going on, so people really are nervous about that. But you will not hear about people in Ohio losing their jobs as a result of a Kaizen event, because that's one of our first scoping rules. A couple of